This Arc Warlock build obliterates everything. With this updated Warlock build, you're going to be smashing all types of content including Grandmasters once they release, using your Arc Soul, your Arc abilities, and your Arc weapons by giving all of them a huge damage buff from multiple sources. And in most types of content, you'll be able to run around with infinite Arc Souls and just melt pretty much everything that gets in your way. Now you're not unkillable, not today, not with this one, so you do have to be careful when you're using this build, but holy damn, can you melt things pretty quick. And bear in mind that this is a Master Lost sector whilst almost 30 under the recommended power level, which is pretty close to being the same difficulty as a Grandmaster Nightfall. So you can see that this thing does a good job in endgame PvE, but using a few of the seasonal perks that we got from Season of the Witch, we're going to really take this build to the next level. So guys, if you like this one, then a rating is much appreciated, and be sure to subscribe if you want to keep up to date with some of the latest builds and Destiny 2 news. But now let's get into it. Roll the intro. Now, Arc Warlocks have had some crazy nerfs in the past, like the Starfire nerf, and also some pretty good buffs. And with every new season we get a bunch of new mods, perks and changes, which is why if you like this build and you want to see more top builds like this for Destiny 2 Season of the Witch, then be sure to check out my full Season 22 class build playlist down below, which is where you'll find all my latest builds up to date for this season. But with this one today, we're going to be taking the Arc subclass on the Warlock with the previous Arc Soul build that we had last season, and update it with some pretty good unique changes for this season. And I have to be honest, I wasn't originally a fan of the new seasonal perks from this season, but after having a play around with them and seeing what they can do, I am actually liking it a lot more this season than the previous. And everything we're using just flows well together because we're going to be using the monochromatic perk that lets us chain damage buffs between our abilities and our arc weapons. So you're basically getting the most out of this build to deal some extra damage that you wouldn't usually have. Now with this build, you're going to want to run arc weapons, and the reason for this is because of the monochromatic perk in the artifact this season. This states that dealing elemental ability damage increases matching weapon damage, and elemental weapon damage increases matching ability damage. The bonus is 10% for 5 seconds. And this doesn't seem to have a cooldown, so you can just keep activating those buffs constantly. So use your arc weapons to buff your arc abilities, and then use your arc abilities to buff your weapons damage, so you can just constantly chain between those two effects on a loop. And with the arc build we've got, we're going to get those abilities back pretty quickly since we're going to be generating ionic traces to give us that ability energy while using Arc Soul. And also having the ability to pick up elemental orbs will give us even more energy, so we shouldn't ever really have any issues with maintaining that damage buff. Now with the Elemental Orbs Arc perk, this will spawn Arc Orbs on Arc weapon kills while using an Arc subclass. It is random, but as I mentioned, picking them up will give us ability energy. Because of the next perk here, Refresh and Pickups, by picking up a Tangle or Elemental Orb will grant us ability energy to our least powered ability. Then our next perk this season is going to be the Elemental Fury. While stunned, champions take bonus damage from your abilities. I like this one a lot because you can just use your arc weapon to buff your abilities damage with the monochromatic perk, then throw an arc grenade at a champion while already having an arc soul and damaging them with arc weapons, and you're going to do some pretty good damage. It is just great for solo players who want to make the most out of the arc subclass on a Warlock. But essentially the way you're going to use this build is you would first consume your grenade to give you an Arc Soul. Your Arc Soul is then going to attack and kill adds, generating ionic traces for ability energy to get that Arc Grenade back. You're then going to damage enemies with arc weapons to buff your arc abilities damage, while also generating arc orbs to throw at adds to give you more energy. And I really do like this gameplay loop a lot. You could even use an elemental munitions in the artifact, the new artifact perk, so that you can generate heavy ammo from the orb kills, but using this in endgame content might not work as efficiently, which is why I won't be using that perk. But for someone who wants to just casually play things like strikes, a dungeon, or even a raid where you can get that orb final blow, it would be a great thing to run to get that ammo spawns that you need for boss DPS with your heavy weapons. So consider running that perk for day 1 raid if you're playing it, because it might actually be worth it. Now before I get to the subclass setup, I just want to go through a few weapons. So I recommend any primary arc weapon with Fault Shot. So a great choice here would be the Ikelos SMG, but you can use any arc weapon of your choice. A few good weapons are Risk Runner if you want to use an exotic, Trinity Ghoul, great option too, and Thunderlord. Those are my main recommendations for some of my favourite arc weapons. For your heavy choice, if you're going for DPS, you're probably better off using a matching arc weapon that's good for DPS, so not a Swarm, use that for ad clear, but things like a Hothead rocket launcher if you've got a good roll on that, because that rocket can be buffed with the monochromatic perk, which I believe stacks with a radiant buff, and then also the debuff from the tether. So you could be outputting some crazy damage with all those buffs by using arc weapons when it comes to things like a day 1 raid or doing Grandmaster Nightfalls. Now in the subclass, you want to run the Chaos Reach super. You don't have to, but it's probably your best option. Then I have a Healing Rift, a Chain Lightning melee. We're only going to use this melee when we're up close to champions and bosses, just so that we can trigger that damage buff to our arc weapons. Then I'm just using a pulse grenade after that as well, which you should be using quite frequently for extra damage. Aspects are going to be Arc Soul, so casting your Rift creates an Arc Soul that fires at targets in front of you, and your Rift charges faster when allies are near. And while amplified, the Arc Souls are supercharged with an increased fire rate. The second aspect is going to be Electrostatic Mind, so defeating targets with arc abilities creates ionic traces, which is going to give us more ability energy and make us amplified. Now I am using the Getaway Artist Exotic here, so that we can start our build while being amplified with a supercharged Arc Soul. You don't have to use this exotic, so you can use other things like a Vesper or a Geomag if you care about the super, or even a Crown of Tempests. It's really down to personal preference and what you want more. Now fragments I have are going to be Spark of Recharge, so that we can regenerate our abilities faster while critically wounded. Spark of Discharge, so our arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an ionic trace. Spark of Resistance, so that we gain damage resistance while surrounded by adds. And Spark of Shock, so that our arc grenade can jolt targets, which is also going to be able to stun overloads too. And you can sort of see how this gameplay loop will work with those fragments and perks. So everything is just about trying to get those abilities back quicker by just using them and your arc weapons to generate the ionic traces as well as the new elemental orbs. And at the same time buffing that damage of both our weapons and our abilities in doing so. So it's just an infinite loop. But in endgame PvE, that loop will feel a little slower than using it in say easier content, because no build is going to truly give you unlimited abilities one after another consistently. But if we can generate them faster, then that's a win. As for mods, I'm running 2 heavy ammo finders and an arc cipher mod. You want the arc cipher mod to generate orbs, which we'll be using for ability energy too. So next in the arms, we have a focus and strike, bolstering detonation and impact induction, so one of each for reduced cooldown on abilities. Chest we have our damage resist mods, legs we have our arc scavenger mod and 2 orbs of restoration. The scavenger mod is discounted with the seasonal perk, so if you are wondering why it's only 1 point, that is why. But for the class, we're just going to be using 2 utility kickstart mods. You do want to try and aim for the triple 100 build if you can, so resilience, recovery and discipline, but if you can't, first focus in resilience and then discipline. You can use D2 Armor Picker to help you optimize these builds, which is how I get my stats pretty high, as it calculates everything for me, from all the high stat gear that I've got lying around in my vault. Anyway, this here is the artifact setup as usual if you want to copy it, and then this here is the mod screen setup, but the dim link will be below for you as well. Honestly, this is a pretty good build, and it does an amazing job at ad clearing alongside you, so if you're someone who just wants a build that isn't so hard to use, then I strongly recommend setting this one up, because it will do a really good job. But if this isn't a build for you, then feel free to check out the full playlist down below, because you might just find your new favourite build this season. Otherwise, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next build. Peace out guys.